to spin and make news. Stop it.
We'll get you through.
Right.
We don't care what you say.
No, you guys, you don't care about the truth at all, do you? You really don't. Asking that question shows me you don't care at all about the truth.
Well, Guy Benson is a radio talk show host and a political editor for townhall.com. Guy, thanks for being back in the program. What's going on there? What is really going on?
That's some frustration from Rick Santorum. And look, I think a lot of people are breaking this down and talking about it. Oh, is this a good thing for him, a bad thing for him? I think if you look at it in the narrow context, it's probably actually a boon to his campaign. Find me one authentic Republican voter who looks at that exchange with the New York Times reporter and is genuinely upset by it. I don't think that there's too many Republicans out there who are mortally offended that a Republican called out a New York Times reporter for asking a question that did, in fact, distort what he was saying. Broader context, maybe a different question. Some people might view it as unpresidential. Some people might view it as frustration starting to seep out because Santorum's in a tough spot in terms of the delegate math, but I don't see how this necessarily hurts him in the short or long term.
Okay, in defense of the New York Times, was Rick Santorum's criticism accurate? Because what the reporter Jeff Zeleny said was, quote, "You said Mitt Romney was the worst Republican in the country. Is that true?" Listen to what Santorum had said moments earlier in the speech.
Any other Republican in the country. He is the worst Republican in the country to put up against Barack Obama. Why would Wisconsin want to vote for someone like that?
Now, he did say those words. He did. It was in the context of a discussion about the health care law, but the words were said. So who's right?
Well, I think in this particular instance, Rick Santorum is right to say that, look, it's a broader context. The guy's name is Jeff Zeleny from the New York Times, who, by the way, is famous for asking President Obama such hard-hitting questions such as, what enchants you most about being president? But that's another story. I think that when he is making the case that Mitt Romney is uniquely disqualified, in his words, to take on President Obama directly on the issue of Obamacare, that's a completely fair point to make. What the New York Times reporter sounded like he tried to spin that into was, why are you calling Mitt Romney the worst Republican in the entire country, which is very clearly what Santorum was not attempting to do.
And Senator Santorum got in trouble last week with conservative pundits for suggesting that they were the same, President Obama and Mitt Romney. He said that's not what I meant to say at all. So I think he may be sensitive on this issue of being overly critical of Mitt Romney. He has already come out fundraising on this issue, on this exchange with the New York Times reporter. He went on Fox and Friends this morning to say, hey, you're not a conservative candidate if you haven't taken on the New York Times. But now the reporter from the New York Times guy is saying this is manufactured. He knew the cameras were rolling. He did this essentially on purpose to get a media moment. And I just want to refresh our viewers, media moments can really help these candidates. Does anyone remember this?
I am frankly astounded that CNN would take trash like that and use it to open a presidential debate. I am tired of the elite media protecting Barack Obama by attacking Republicans.
Yeah, of course there are manufactured moments. You're on a rope line, there's a New York Times reporter standing right there who asks a question that in the context isn't entirely accurate or fair, and you tee off on him. It's like politics 101, especially in a Republican primary. I mean, if Jeff Zeleny from the New York Times wants to focus on manufactured storylines, maybe he should focus on how the Democrats just invented this war on women thing out of nowhere. So, look, I don't think this is... Oh, here's one other thing, Megan, and I don't know if you would agree with this, but I think a lot of people look at Rick Santorum as sort of a preachy, moralistic guy who's always holier than thou. That's one of his... the critics will say that about him. I think for him to kind of lose his cool a little bit, get ruffled, and even drop a word that you wouldn't expect Rick Santorum to say, maybe a little bit humanizing. It's like, okay, this guy isn't that much better than everyone else.
Interesting. So a well-placed, not F-bomb, but B-bomb can potentially help a presidential candidate. All right, Guy, thank you so much for being here. Always a pleasure, sir.
Sure thing. Thanks, Megan.